Hello, I'm Kads and welcome to today's video. So today we're going to be discussing my fusion plan for getting the latest Fragment Summon Champion Fragment fusion in the game, Kroz Wallbreaker. Now, Kroz Wallbreaker is a Spirit Affinity legendary attack champion, specifically a bomb attack champion for the Ogre tribes, a faction that definitely needs a lot of loves in terms of the champion quality and diversity. And on paper, I definitely will admit that I was a little bit overexcited about the capabilities of the champion, but having seen him tested a little bit, I'm now a little bit disappointed, and I think they could have done a little bit better to make him a little bit better. So it's a little bit unfortunate based on what I've seen, but we'll come back to that a little bit later here. So let's dive into the kit and talk about whether or not he's worth it to go for on your account. So on the A1 here, attacks one enemy 3 times, has a 50% chance when booked of decreasing the detonation countdown of all bombs on the target by 1 turn. So this is fairly reliable. I think this maths out to like a 88% chance that he will at least do this one time or reduce it by 1 turn, which in most cases might actually just pop it on the target and kill them. And as an added bonus, there's also just a 50% chance to place a stun debuff on the target for 1 turn. These are independent, so you can do both at the same time, meaning you could stun them as well as decrease the cooldown or decrease the countdown of bombs on the target. So a fairly reliable form of CC on the A1, which would pair nicely with Retribution as a mastery, for example. Moving on to the A2, this is definitely kind of his bread and butter ability here, but when booked has a 100% chance of placing 2 bomb debuffs on each enemy that will detonate after 2 turns, and this will fill this champion's turn meter by 25% for each enemy with a bomb debuff. Now, the way this works is it's not for each bomb on each enemy. That probably would have been better, arguably. At least it would have scaled better with the accuracy. That could be one way that you can improve the champion for the reason we'll talk about in a second here. But as long as each enemy, thinking in a PvP context, as long as each enemy has a bomb, it doesn't necessarily have to be his bombs, could be bombs placed by other people. So if you have someone going before him or him himself placing bombs on all 4 enemies, again thinking in the arena context, then you will get a 100% turn meter after this ability is used. The very, very big problem here is that 100% turn meter sounds like a lot. It sounds like an instant turn, but the way turn meter works in this game, you can go above 100%. So you're not realistically going to get an extra turn from this ability unless your enemies are ridiculously slow, which is just not the case. That's not the current meta in the game. Of course, we're in a pseudo speed, if not an all-out speed meta currently, again, particularly in PvP. In practice, what's happens here, let's say that he's going to go next in whatever turn rotation in the battle, and the enemy team is going to go right after him. Their turn meter is basically full. They're about to take their turn immediately after him. Him placing bombs on everyone would make him skip the line relative to slower champions, but whoever was going to go next, the next probably like 3-ish champions who were going to go next are probably still going to get their turns before him, and then he'll come back around and he'll cut in and get his turn based on that turn meter. So there's a lot of things that can happen in that time frame. It could be a cleanser, it could be someone who resisted the debuffs and you don't get the full turn meter. So there's a lot of instances where this will not give him close to an extra turn at all, or he just won't go next and someone cleanses all the bombs and he doesn't get to do anything else in his kit, which can be very, very unfortunate. However, the counter to that is that this is a really cool ability because it just places bombs on an AoE. So as a setup champion, maybe you could use someone else to detonate them. We'll talk about that a little bit later. This is an affinity friendly bomb placement because he's not attacking. So regardless of him being Spirit Affinity, he just places the bombs, so you don't have to worry about weak hits and not landing the bombs because of that. And this is on a 4-turn cooldown when booked. Lastly, we have then the A3 and AoE attack here on a 3-turn cooldown when booked, and it has a 100% chance when booked of decreasing the detonation countdown of all bombs by 1 turn. So if you do happen to go against a relatively slow team, a UDK comes to mind example like that, then you would be able to lap that type of champion, come around and decrease the detonation cooldown to 1 turn. Obviously you start with them being for 2 turns when you place them, so that means that whenever they would get their turn, if you get this ability off, they would instantly detonate, the bombs would pop, and then potentially if they're under stone skin, for example, they would probably die. And then if they're not under stone skin for some reason, then you would also have a 100% chance of placing block active skills for 2 turns. That again, this is on a 3-turn cooldown. So with Master Hexer, there is a chance, albeit small, that you could permanently lock out people by placing block active skills for 3 turns on a 3-turn cooldown. But again, as we talked about, with the lack of a perfect extra turn when it comes to using the A2, you may not get this ability off before their cleanser or whoever cuts in, or just in general, you might not be be able to get this off because of just how the A2 works. Lastly, we have the passive here that will fill all allies' turn meters by 5% each time a bomb debuff detonates. So everyone on your team is just going to get turn meter every time a bomb pops. But also, this champion has a 20% chance of activating an instant turn when an enemy or an ally is killed by a bomb debuff. Now, of course, this is not going to help him if he happens to be the person who dies from the bomb debuff, but nonetheless, it's a small chance, but it can help get around the fact that he may not get an instant turn after this ability is used. If there are other bombs out there, or again, you use someone else to pop his bombs, then he might be able to cut in and then use his ability to pop the other bombs, or use the A1 to pop bombs on a single target. So again, there can be some synergy if you use him with other bomb decreased detonation champions. So in terms of his overall capabilities as a champion on his own, I'd probably give him like a C. I still think people who have Gnishak Verminlord are probably better off using him. Obviously, if you have Communist, you kind of won the game in terms of bomb champions. Guys the Gleeful is okay as well as Lord Shazar. People or champions like War Mother don't really see the light of day, unfortunately. But yeah, he's not the best. I would say he's probably in the same ballpark as Gaius, where in the Stone Skin meta, he just doesn't work as well because Gaius has the problem of he's great in the sense that he can place the AoE sleep when he places 2 bombs, but if they have Stone Skin, then they can't be slept. Therefore, they're free to cleanse on their turn when the bombs are out there for 2 turns, even though he does have an ability where he can activate them in his kit. But I do think, though, if you were to run this champion with a Gnishak Verminlord, for example, this guy comes out, he can cover the gap of a Spirit Affinity champions where Gnishak is more likely to weak hit and thus not place any bombs at all. Then if you run him first, you can make sure that everyone has bombs on them, and then Gnishak can come in there and try and reduce the duration down to 1 or place more bombs. And then when bombs start to pop, either from this ability here, from Gnishak's ability, or whoever you're pairing him with, Lord Shazar could work as well, then you have the chance to go in with the instant turn and do more things to decrease the duration of bombs. So there can be some synergy with him and Lord Shazar coming to mind because he decreased the duration when he places his bombs, or running him with a Gnishak for the same kind of logic. So I think he's more of a tandem champion, just as the kit reads. Now, in terms of the base stats, he has a respectable amount of HP for an attack-based champion, but the main thing you care about is the attack, because of course his bombs scale with attack. He does have a higher base attack than Gnishak Verminlord, but it is a little bit lower than Gaius the Gleeful, and it's higher than like Lord Shazar, for example. He does have the benefit of a lot of speed, and 110 base speed is relatively fast, so pinpoint gear would definitely make the most sense on him. And again, he's going to work really, really well as kind of the initial bomb placer, initial setup champion for that kind of situation. And then he also has the extra accuracy of the extra 20 relative to 0. Every champion in the game has 30 resistance base. So right out of the gate, to answer the question, is this champion worth it to go on your account? It kind of depends what you have on your roster. If you have absolutely no bombers that are relatively meta, so you don't have Gnishak Verminlord, you don't have a Communist, then this guy definitely will work in a lot of cases. However, he's just not going to be the best champion on his own. You'd have to have a ridiculously well-tuned team, in the sense that maybe you would have to have your initial speed booster to go first so that you get your turn. He places his bombs, he gets a bunch of turn meter, and then you'd have to have like a secondary turn meter fill right after speed tune to go right after him, but before the enemies, so they're within 1 speed of each other, and thus you could boost his turn meter such that he would go ahead of who otherwise would have went from the enemy team. But even then, you still have the possibility that you could weak hit on this detonation decrease on the A3 because of the affinity aspect of this aspect of his kit. And so magic affinity champions he could be extremely weak going into because of that. And I'm thinking like an Elva Autumnborn or some other cleanser who could come in there, cleanse the bombs off because you didn't decrease the bombs on her to 1 turn, therefore she didn't die when she got her turn if she's built relatively fast. So there's still flaws even if you were to run some sort of double speed boosting composition. But anyways, again, I think he's a decent champion if you run him as a tandem with some other bomb decrease in detonation champion, but on his own he's just not going to be that great unless he's your absolute only option. However, I do want to point out that when it comes to hard mode faction wars, if you don't have a War Mother, doing that trial for killing I think 10 enemies with bombs is extremely difficult. With the epics like Galcutting, for example, his bombs aren't as strong, and I think they're like 3 turn duration, so they take forever to go off. And so obviously I don't necessarily recommend going for a champion and blowing up your account just to do one trial in hard mode faction wars. That's probably not the best value. But if you can do it and you're interested long term in getting Polara, then you're going to want to have this guy at least on your account. You don't necessarily have to book him immediately or use him immediately, but just having him in your back pocket could be useful for that trial in the future. So now for the 10% of you that are still interested in going for this champion, let's hop over to the Fusion Plan spreadsheet, which will be linked in the description box down below if you'd like a copy of this for yourself or just to follow along on the live version that you see here and talk about what this fusion can and will require. So first of all, once again, this is a fragment summon, meaning that you do have to collect all of the champion fragments here from all of these different events and tournaments. We can ignore the +10 for winning the champion chase and winning the champion training tournament. So there are 110 fragments up for grabs total, meaning that you do have some bandwidth to skip some set of the events that add up to 10 fragments in total, assuming of course that you did everything else that was up for grabs. In terms of this particular fusion, it is a very par for the course layout here. So we have the 4 dungeon split. There's no event dungeon. It is closed at the moment, so you don't have to worry about that. We have 2 classic arena tournaments. We have a champion training tournament going on right now. We have a champion chase tournament. We'll come back to that a little bit later. We have 3 gear hunters events. We have 3 gear enhancement events. We have a champion training event, and then we have the summon rush, which starts tomorrow. There's only like a couple of noteworthy things relative to this fusion. So as I always like to highlight the pinch points, which are the overlap between champion training as well as some sort of dungeon tournament. So we do have one at the beginning here with the entirety of the Fire Knight tournament overlapping with champion training, and then somewhere near the end where we have champion training overlapping with the entirety of the Ice Golem tournament. But arguably the more important thing to highlight here is that the potential for what's going to happen for Black Friday. Historically speaking, what they used to do maybe like 2, 3, and 4 years ago, Black Friday was a triple 2x, but it was each individual day. So like the first day, let's say for example, Friday would have been 2x Ancients, Saturday would have been 2x Voids, and Sunday would have been 2x Sacreds. Not necessarily in that order, but you get the idea. That's the concept of it. However, last year, for the first time, they did a triple 2x, meaning for the entirety of all 3 days, it was 2x on Ancients, Voids, and Sacreds. So you basically got to choose which of those shard types you wanted to pull in order to participate in the champion chase. Obviously, Ancients would be the cheapest, Sacreds being the most expensive, Voids being somewhere in the middle. As of this recording, we have no idea what this is actually going to be, but I'm just giving you some of the historical context of what has happened in the past and what to expect. So I would expect some sort of combinational 2x going on there where you can basically use any type of shards you want in order to get this fusion. So if your primary concern is that you basically don't have any good shards, you don't have any Sacreds or Voids left because you used them all to try and guarantee Leo for yourself recently from his Hero's Path, then you could potentially still get this fusion done if you have, you know, like on the order of like 60, 70-ish ancient shards, because that's on average what you would need to get the minimum amount of points from the champion chase. And then even if you were concerned about the summon rush, if you were to max at the champion chase with, for example, let's say the 2 extensions was part of the deal there for Black Friday, then you don't have any Sacreds for the summon rush, you could definitely get away with just using mystery shards for what I predict to be the milestone of around 2,000. But even if you wanted to go all out, you could pull 3,000 mystery shards and get the entire thing done without having to pull any of the bigger or primary shards. And speaking of the milestones here, for those who are unfamiliar with this spreadsheet, over here on the right hand side, we do have the milestones for each of the events and tournaments. Anything marked with an asterisk, it means it is a predicted value based off historical precedent, and I will update these as they go live in the game. So for example, champion training is already live, so we know that these milestones are what they are, but they also do tend to match or correlate with previous events in the past. In the second column, I'll highlight the primary cost in terms of what it takes to get the points from whatever event or tournament, but I also do use this to catalog the amount of shards that I personally have used for these events and the amount of silver that I use for the gear enhancement specifically. So if you want to go back in history and look at the amount of silver that I spent on each different gear enhancement event, or the amount of shards that I pulled for each of the different summon rushes and or heroes paths or champion chases, you can see all that dating all the way back to Pythion, so the end of 2023. So once the summon rush goes live, we'll be able to see if my prediction here based off historical precedent is correct, and so we could see a cost of around, or at least I would plan to do 4 Sacreds here to get the minimum, and then I would spend the whatever the higher milestone is, I would spend mystery shards to close that gap, just because I want to use I want to secure 110 fragments on my account by doing everything, and thus I can use the extra 10 and slowly but surely chip away at getting a high mother mound on my account. The last thing to mention here is that at the bottom, I alluded to it earlier with the pinch points, but I do like to lay out my energy plan. This is just how I plan to spend my energy over the course of the fragment summon. This is not a a prescription necessarily for how you should spend your energy. I like to do things kind of day by day, but just an idea of how I plan to spend my energy each day going on for the fusion. Popping back in the game, let's talk about the current events going on right now, just to give you a little preview of what I have done for the beginning of the fusion. But first, as I do like to highlight at the beginning of fusions, let's take a snapshot of my current supply count on the account in terms of the gems and the silver. As of this morning, I didn't actually remember to take stock of my exact silver stack, but I want to estimate based on the amount of champion training that I've done, a little bit of Fire Knight as well, as we'll take a look at in a little bit here. I want to say that I started off with around 208-ish million silver, and then on the gems, let's benchmark it at the 4950 you see here. At the end of the fusion on my community tab page, I will be posting a summary of the deltas of my shards as well as the silver and gems, just to kind of highlight what it overall cost me as an endgame free-to-play player to get the fusion done. Full disclosure here, regardless of the quality of the champions, even though I gave him a C on his own, I go for every single fusion and fragment summon because you never know how powerful the champions might be. I still need to do that trial in hard mode faction wars for the Ogun tribes to bomb them. Despite currently having War Mother, she's just low on my list of focuses in order to max her out and get her situated for that, but I could run them together, of course, to make it even easier. But anyways, I'm still going for this champion despite him kind of not living up to my expectations, just because that's kind of my default setting, regardless if the champions are good or not. And I do have a collection of, air quotes, bad champions that are just sitting here, Zinogre Blade Master, Uga the Worm Eater, and I guess that's it. Those are the only two. But yeah, any bad fusions, fragment summons, I just kind of leave them in the portal until I actually need them. If I ever do need them, then I summon them for other reasons. But yeah, so I don't mind kind of just having them saved up for future utility if need be. So taking a quick stock of the current events going on right now, obviously the fusion warm up at this point is basically done. It was just pulling 20 agents for 4 days, and that was pretty easy to do. Summoner starts tomorrow, as we highlighted. The first gear enhancement starts tomorrow as well, so we'll be spending some silver tomorrow. Gear hunters thankfully started on the first day, so we got to make some progress on that. You can see here I'm already at 1270. I've been running a lot of campaign, as we'll see in a little bit, and a little bit of Fire Knight, and so I do plan to be able to get all the way out to here to the 3700 relatively easily without having to burn a bunch of gems other than what I've already been doing. In terms of the tournaments, this might come as a surprise for anyone who's not familiar with how I like to treat champion training, but we're pretty much halfway there to the legendary tome. We're basically done if you're counting towards getting towards just, essentially done if you're thinking about getting just the fragments for the fusion here. But for me and my purposes, I am a legendary tome chaser, so I'm going to be going all the way out there to the 12,000, so over halfway. So huge chunk of that was already done despite it being the first day. In my case, I had a lot of energy saved up waiting for the next champion training event, and I also 6-star 2 champions, Leonardo and Donatello, so the 2 of the Ninja Turtles. So that is why I got a lot of points despite it only being the first day. And what that has done is that it allows me to effectively focus on Fire Knight for the next couple of days or so with all my energy to try and get as much of this done. That way I can get this done a little bit earlier, get more points relative to the Dungeon Divers as well, and kind of work my way towards the 2250, which is the pretty standard amount there for that. So that's basically it as far as what's going on right now. But yeah, I definitely started, but I hit the ground running with champion training just so I can get ahead, but I'm kind of switching over to Fire Knight for the next couple of days to kind of whittle or get as close as possible to the 2250. So yeah, that's going to do it for my free-to-play fusion plan for getting Kroz Wallbreaker. Let me know in the comment section down below if you plan to go for this guy. As I kind of highlighted, I was definitely myself was disappointed. I had a relatively high expectations relative to what he could do in the arena context. I still think he's going to be useful, but I think he needs to be paired with some other bomb champion. He can't really just work on his own, at least to the best of his abilities. I do wish that, in the future they might change this ability or buff it. I doubt it, but I think it would be fair to make this like 30% or 33% or something like that, so that, he effectively gets an extra turn as long as he places bombs on 3 people, or it's guaranteed if he places it on 4 because he gets 133% turn or something like that, to kind of make it more surefire that he gets an extra turn. Or you just give him an extra turn, maybe. I don't know, that might be too strong. I don't know. They kind of wanted to do something a little bit different. I do know that, from a player's perspective, they didn't want, a bunch of champions to do the exact same thing. That's why every single cleanser in the game doesn't also have block debuffs, because it would be a little bit kind of not boring necessarily, but it would just be a lot really redundant. And so you'd have a little less champion diversity. So I don't expect them to make this and change this into an extra turn, but I do think they can increase this value just to make it a little bit more more reliable as an effective extra turn if you are able to land the bombs, meaning that you have enough accuracy, because you still have to pass an accuracy check relative to your enemy's resistance in order to make that happen, which I think is a form of balance, making it a somewhat gear dependent balancing of his abilities and his capabilities. But yeah, anyways, let me know your thoughts on this champion, and do you agree with the my assessment of the champion? As always, if you didn't enjoy this video, then be sure to hit the like button down below. It really does help out the channel, and also feel free to hit the subscribe button down below if and only if you're enjoying the content on the channel for more content just like this one in the future. Thanks for watching, and have a good one.